Hello and welcome. This is Karen, and today I'm going to show you how I created the backgrounds for these cards. I am using the wonderful Spotlight Holiday Element stamp set from Waffle Flower, which has a gorgeous modern look to it. And to showcase that, I'm actually creating this background out of greys and blacks and white. So I'm starting with a panel of Bristol Smooth cardstock, and the Distress Oxide inks I'm using are Pumice Stone, Smoked Hickory and Black Soot. So to start with, I'm just randomly adding some ink over my panel in no particular way, just getting it on there to create a base and cover up that white. And fair to say, at the moment it looks like a hot mess, but it does come together nicely later on. So after I've added the three colours on there, I now take my handmade stencil, which I cut from some acetate and using some square dies, and as you can see it's been well used, and so I just position the largest square opening over one part of the panel and just ink blend some more ink on in the three different colours. So I start with the largest square and the lightest ink, and I'm just going round adding it randomly. There's no rhyme nor reason, just adding the ink on, trying to keep the squares straight, although it's not the end of the world if they're slightly askew. But I'm just adding that ink on. Now onto the second largest square opening, and then I'll go to the smallest one, and I'll work through that with all three of the ink colours until I'm happy with the result. And it just adds different tones and shades with that graphic square look. I guess you can do it with any shape die. Be quite cool to see it actually with circles, thinking on that. So working through with the pumice stone, once I finish with that I clean up my work surface, I wipe off the acetate sheet on both sides because I don't want to smear that ink anywhere, and then I'll dry the acetate sheet quickly with a paper towel. So now I'm on to the second colour, which is the hickory smoke. So again, start with the largest square, blend on some ink, move it around, and you can start to see it's taking a bit of shape now. The squares are starting to show up a bit more. Of course, that lightest shade, that pumice stone, doesn't show up very much, but it's good to have all those different shades. And then when we add in the white, it really makes it stand out. So onto the second size square, onto the baby square, and you can see that I'm actually overlapping some of the other squares, both in the same colour and in the different colours. I really just want to build up that pattern. After the black's been put on, which I didn't leave in the video because it was the same old, I'm now bringing on some unicorn white, and I have added that ink to my glass work mat so that I don't contaminate my ink pad, and I'm just picking up the ink off my glass work mat and adding it on exactly the same as I did with the other three colours. And you can start to see now where we're getting the different shades and tones, and those squares are overlapping, and there's different intensities of ink colour, which actually creates quite a cool effect. And I'm going over the different squares with different coloured inks and also the same ink, because if you go over a corner of a square with the same ink again, you get another intensity again. So as I say, it's all random. It's just where I think it needs some lighter or darker colour, I'm just adding it on there. I'm not using anything to hold the stencil in place apart from my fingers, and it all goes rather quickly. Then once I have finished with the acetate stencil, I will clean it off and put the panel aside to dry, because I'm sure you can appreciate there's a fair amount of ink on there that needs time to dry. Just finishing up now and looking at it going, yep, that'll do. So once it's dry, I've taken my MISTI and I'm positioning the card base, the white card base, in my MISTI, and I'm laying on one of Waffle Flower's Nesting rectangle frame die so I can position my stamp and get my stamp in the place that I want it. So I'm laying that stamp over top of the die, and then I will remove the die before I stamp that image onto the card base. So I'm just using a bit of repositionable tape to keep that card base closed, and then I'm ready to stamp. So I'm using some VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which I prefer for stamping sentiments and images. It's just so crisp and bold and black. So I'll stamp that down. I'm actually going to stamp it twice to get a darker, crisper image. And I'll leave the stamp in my MISTI because I'm going to do some more stamping and I need that positioning exactly right. So take out the card base, and then I'm going to pop in the ink blended panel, and I'm going to stamp in exactly the same place. So get ink on my hands, ink up the stamp, stamp it down, give it a good amount of pressure, and I will repeat that process again. Okay, I'm going to heat set this sentiment because VersaFine Onyx Black is a pigment ink and it does take a wee while to dry, and I do not want to smear it after all that hard work of ink blending. So once that is heat set, then I'm ready to actually do some die cutting. So I take that same nesting rectangle frame die and I die cut it into that panel. I'm just cleaning up the die now because a little bit of ink was still wet and I don't like my dies being dirty. So now I've got 3 pieces of that frame, and I'm just going to temporarily adhere that center panel to my card base to help with positioning the other 2 pieces. So I'm lining up and matching the frame with the image so that it all appears seamless. It does take me a wee minute to get that exactly lined up, but it is worth it in the end to get that seamless look. So just wait while she lines it up. Oop, there she goes. So all lined up. So now I can add some liquid glue to the outer frame and adhere that onto the card base. So I'm just checking that it all lines up and it fits, and that I've cut my card base straight. So I'll get my liquid glue, add some around the edges, and then put that down on the card base. And it just slots into place like a jigsaw puzzle, so I don't have to worry about lining up with the image, because I know that I've already done that hard work with that center frame. So now with the inner, I'm actually going to add a bit of dimension for some interest, and so I'm using some foam tape to add a layer of dimension to that panel. So I'll add that on there and then position that in the center and again it'll all fit into place. Don't have to line it up, it just slots into the gap. Once that's in, it's time to remove that center panel, so I just very carefully lift that away, and there is my card. So with the center panel I get a bonus card. So luckily I'd left the stamp in my MISTI, so I took another card base and stamped again in that exact same spot with the VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and then I can just adhere that frame over the top and a second card. So I didn't add any dimension to this card, but it would look really cool with foam tape around that frame as well. But I left mine adhered straight to the card base for ease of posting. To finish off the cards, I added some enamel dots. And there are my 2 cards done. So thanks so much for sticking with me. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll catch you again another time. Thanks very much. See ya.